Hi, it's Dr. Ray. Welcome to my breakdown of creating your works cited and proper formatting for an essay, and of course, English 112, English 100, um, but also really any liberal arts college course. So let's move forward. MLA. So I've told you need to use MLA formatting. I'm sure you've heard this before in other English classes. You probably need this in history courses and humanities courses. What does MLA stand for? It stands for Modern Language Association, and it is. I like to think of it as the powers that be on the mountaintop of English professors and teachers that decide the clearest, best way to cite information for the humanities. And you might think, well, why is there APA for psychology and MLA for English? This is so unfair. It is confusing. I'm going to show you a resource to always help you, but think about in the humanities, the most important piece of information for us typically is who wrote it. And that's why in citations, we always want the author's last name first and foremost. When it comes to things like, biology and psychology, another key component with that kind of research is the date. And that's why the citations look different. Just keep that in mind. There are reasons behind the choices, but I'm going to walk you through how we cite for MLA and how we cite for English courses. Okay. Why do you need a works cite at the end of your paper? It's one more step. You've written this paper, you want to be done, and you have to format it, make it look just right. Like the credits at the end of the movie, you must credit every source, every author who contributed to your paper. So think about some huge blockbuster movies. I know it's been a couple years, but I guess the Spider-Man Far From Home, if they didn't cite, Tobey Maguire as one of the actors, he would now own Disney, right? Because you have to give credit where credit is due. So it's it's a legal issue. You have to cite properly where you got the information. But moreover, when you write a paper and you're using great sources, the person reading it might be like, oh, I want to read that. I want to follow that trail. I found so many great resources through students. Like they've found something on Kate Chopin, for example, and I'm like, I want to teach that next year. So you have to cite it properly, and Works Cited gives us the clearest way to show where that information came from, how to track it down, who contributed, what vessel it was in, and all those important things. So for MLA, it's not called a bibliography. It's not just called sources. It's called your works cited. Center those words, works cited. Don't bold them. Don't italicize them. Don't underline them. Don't make it size 25 font, just the regular font size, 12 point in the center of your page. And you use hanging indent for all your sources. And what that looks like is this. It says works cited on top, you'll notice. Everything is double spaced. Typically, and you don't need to worry about this, Google Doc or Word will make a slightly bigger space between sources. I don't care. But everything needs to be double spaced. Hanging indent, I can show you how to do that in a Google Doc, but it's that the first line is properly indented 1 inch in. And then in a Google Doc, I know you highlight it and then you hit lines and spacing, special hanging. Same thing for Word, but everything after that first line needs to have that hanging indent. Other just key tips to know for a works cited, it's almost always the author's last name that's going to come first, and it's going to be listed alphabetically based on last name. If it's like a website where no author is listed, then the magazine website, like the title of the website will come first. If it's something small, like so even if you're writing our your paper about checking out would appear in quotation marks. Small things, song titles, chapter titles, poems go in quotation marks. Bigger things, the name of a magazine, the name of an album, the name of a movie, the name of a book, the name of a journal, these would be italicized. And I mentioned Avengers, of course, I had to put Iron Man in there. How does it all connect? What does it look like? So, this is a book that I taught English 100, a chapter from a book called Acting Out Culture. David Brooks has this great article where he's arguing this very controversial point that people like to hang out with people like themselves. Don't agree with them? It's great to look at and talk about. So I have a quote from him. He writes, here's the quote. And what's 71 mean? Well, if someone was like, I need to find this David Brooks guy, they would go to the student's works cited. It's going to be last name, then first, the name of the article, and then where it was found, which is an anthology, and it has all this information. I'm sure you know there's great websites out there like Citation Builder and things like that that will create it for you. Sometimes they're wonky, so it's important to know what it needs to look like so you can just double check it and spot check it. But you also need to find out all this information so it can help you build it. Citing internet sources is a pain in the tuchus, right? Ideally, if you were citing something off the internet, I would want all this information, right? Not just me. MLA is very greedy. They want everything from the date it was published, the date it was accessed, to, who wrote it and the URL and all these things. I guarantee 9 out of 10 times all of this information will not be available. So what do? You skip over what you don't have. So if there's no author listed, let's say it's an article in the Atlantic and there's no author listed, it would just say the Atlantic, right? And then you would move forward with the article title and the information. It is not required. It is highly recommended that you note the date that you accessed it. Why? Especially if it's like a website, those disappear. They're up, down. So showing when you accessed it explains like, okay, so it was available then, but it's not now. These are some examples of websites cited. You can see here the top one is WebMD. There's no author listed, but it does note the date it was published. The student could have noted the date they accessed it. Not required, recommended. I love that the chili is about to flip over. Um, but there's I told you I like cooking. So when it comes to how to make vegetarian chili, you've got last name, first name, the article, the website it came from, the URL, and the date it was accessed because it looks like there was no publication date. So the student didn't have that piece of information when it was published. So they just shared when they accessed it. And this is just similarly what it would look like if you were talking about a website in your paper, like maybe Falugo wrote something on a website, and you wouldn't necessarily need a colon. You could use a comma. Either way is fine. But I would need to be able to find that information here in your Works Cited. So we've gone over how to cite a book, how to cite, an online source. What if you want to cite something a teacher said in a lecture in another course, or a TV show that you saw that's relevant, or a chapter in a book? All of this information is on Purdue OWL, which I will talk about again in a moment. But it's, Purdue OWL is Purdue's University Online Writing Lab. Just owl.purdue.edu, put that in your browser, and then put how to cite a magazine, how to cite a newspaper. All that information will be relevant. Briefly, I wanted to talk about formatting because I typically don't have this problem from students, but occasionally someone doesn't know what the paper needs to look like, or they build me like a title page, which is maybe something you do for a science report. You do not need it for an English paper. So again, MLA format as per the Modern Language Association we use for English courses and humanities courses. Please don't use the approaches for APA or Chicago or any of those things. Why is it so important your paper be formatted correctly? Can you imagine if I would be this person at the desk, like face palming, if students just got to format it however they wanted, align right, size 18 font, Comic Sans font in the bottom and a different font centered in the top. It would make me insane, right? I wouldn't be able to focus on your ideas. I would be lost in the non-standard way of you aligned your paper. The standardization makes it easier for your reader to access. That's what all these rules are about. They're not just to make us crazy. So what are the rules? Double space your paper. It typically happens automatically, but everyone probably knows you can highlight it. You go to paragraph, double space. Your paper is going to automatically have 1-inch margins. Now, it is not in your favor that I was the worst in undergrad 100 years ago when I didn't have quite enough information of adjusting those margins or making the font a little bit bigger. I will spot it in a second. Also, when I was an undergrad, I was rewarded for the fluffiness. They wanted 12-page papers. I don't want that from you. I want clean, concise, beautiful writing. You shouldn't feel like you have to make it look longer. Every word counts. So just don't mess with the 1-inch margins. They happen automatically. Times New Roman 12-point font. That is the standard font that the powers that be have agreed upon that we use. In the upper left-hand corner, your name, you come first. Then my name, put Professor Ray, Dr. Ray, Susan Ray, doesn't matter. The course, English 112-00, whatever. And the date that you wrote it, which is typically like day, month, year. So 3/1 September 2023. 2 more slides, guys. We're almost there. Your title. So you come up with the title. We'll talk about that in the future. Center it. Don't underline it. Don't italicize it. Don't make it a larger font. It could be, Tracing Problematic Masculinity in Diaz's Cheater's Guide to Love. What a great title. Know exactly what that paper's about. But again, it would appear right here in the center, like in the sample paper. In the top right corner, it should have your last name and page number. Depending if you're using Word or, a Google Doc. There's different ways, but typically it's insert page number. And you do it on the first page. You type your last name next to that one, and it'll automatically happen on every following page. But if you look at this sample where I've written nice across it, their last name, teacher's name, their name, teacher's name, course date. They've got their last name and page number, top right corner, centered title, that Times New Roman size 12 font. This is what the first page should look like. If you feel stressed about any of this, Purdue Owl, my friends, owl.purdue.edu. You can think of a little owl in the corner if it helps you remember. Anything I write on your papers, if I write subject verb agreement or improper citation or rework your thesis, whatever, everything we cover in this course in terms of grammar and citation is available, broken down in further detail on Purdue Owl. It's our online writing handbook. Contact me with any questions.